Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. When we look at soil tests from the fall and fields that are going to be soybeans next year, one of the things that we're watching for is factors such as high pH that could lead to more iron deficiency chlorosis. We'll talk about other things you can do to prevent this problem from your soybean fields next year.
Well, unfortunately, one of the things that's been on farmers' minds here in the United States for the last year and a half has been tariffs, especially in dealing with China. We're going to talk just a little bit about how tariffs are affecting your input costs on today's show.
Well, one other thing that'll impact your input costs, Brian, is if you have our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to stop this weed a little later in the show. But first, here's our farm basics.
The last thing you want after harvesting your grain is to spoil it before it goes to market. The Grain Temp Guard from Farm Shop MFG is a low-cost bin monitoring solution that tracks temperature and humidity and alerts you when conditions exceed safe thresholds. Visit farmshopmfg.com.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about why farmers occasionally burn their ditches.
Well, they certainly wouldn't burn ditches on a day like today. It's really windy out today, but on a day that it's
let's
calm,
hope they don't burn
on a
ditches
day that
today.
It's calm, they may consider burning some ditches. And it is a common practice in many areas for a few different reasons. So we wanted to talk about why they're going to do that.
Okay, so first of all, like on our own farm, we think an awful lot about snow getting across the roads. One of the things you may not think about if, let's say, you live in town, is that farmers often have to push their own snow, not just by their house or in their farmyard, but on the roads as well. So on our farm for years, we've had to clean roughly 1.5 miles worth of road almost every time it snows, because it's very common for the township to take a couple of days before they get out there because they have a lot to do, and we get it. It's no big deal. We have our own equipment. It's fine. But what we worry about with these ditches is if the grass gets real tall, well, all of a sudden that creates a little bit of a snow fence, and now there's a lot more snow that piles up on the road and a lot more work that we have to do.
Well, and if you think about that, okay, how do I eliminate this? Well, you could mow the grass, and in many areas that's what happens. We see townships and also local farmers will mow the grass. Many times they'll even bale it up and use it for livestock feed, which is great. But some of these ditches are pretty rough or pretty steep,
right,
and it's just impossible to do that. Burning the ditch offers a way to get that done without any long-term damage to the ditch. This is the real key here. You're just burning off the dead grass on top of the ground. You're not killing the root system underneath. It's really more of a flash fire.
Yeah, so it is kind of interesting. Quite often we see great grass growth after the ditch has gotten burned, because what happens a lot of times is in that ditch there's all this grass that has kind of piled up over the years, all the old residue, and it's hard for those new shoots to get started every spring. Well, if that grass has been burned away, all that extra stuff burned away, now right away in the spring the grass gets up and gets started a little earlier.
The other thing is these ditches are often where weed problems for next year's crop starts. It's where insects will a lot of times lay eggs and overwinter, those kinds of things. So you can wipe out weeds, insects, and diseases many times by burning off that ditch. So it's not something where farmers are going to burn off every ditch in the county, but when there are some ditches that they do need to burn, this is one of the side benefits.
So once again, if you do see some ditches burning around your area this fall, now you understand why the farmer's doing it. Number one, in a lot of areas, it's about the snow. But then, like Darren said, certainly it can be to just get the grass started earlier in the spring or to kill off weeds, insects, or diseases.
Well, one of the weeds that you may see out in those ditches is our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?
More choices, more money. With Bayer Plus Rewards, you choose from our broad portfolio of high-performance products. Earn more money on the eligible products that are right for your farm. And use our new portal to see your purchases, track your rewards, and decide how you want to use them. Visit mybayerplus.com to sign in and start earning. That's the advantage of more control in your hands. That's the plus.
What's the most complex industry on Earth? It isn't big data or commodities, not genetics or meteorology. or even logistics. It's a business that involves them all. It's farming. And we're proud to work with generations of American farmers in the most complex and rewarding industry on Earth.
We started utilizing the dual react system this year. You can adjust your speed and it automatically adjusts your sprayer tips. So you can slow down and you aren't building up huge droplets, or you can speed up and you're not throwing a mist that's drifting.
Hypro, helping you spray better.
In 1949, Morton Buildings constructed our first machine storage building to establish our bond with the farming community. Since then, our relationship has grown, and so have our product offerings. From the smallest specialized operation to the largest agricultural enterprise, we understand the needs of your business and continue to evolve to meet industry demands. Plus, when you build a Morton building, you're backed by the strongest warranty in the business. To learn more about the Morton Advantage, visit mortonbuildings.com.
Do you feel like there's never enough time to get everything done before planting? The window for spring work is quick and unforgiving. Give yourself the upper hand with the ProTill High Performance High Speed Disc. More and more farmers agree the ProTill is the right tool for springfield conditions and heavy residue management. Zero maintenance bearings, independent disc technology, oversized pins and bushings allow the ProTill to handle whatever field or conditions you can throw at it. Degelman High Performance Equipment.
Tough, precise, efficient. Strip tillage with the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm. Learn more at soilwarrior.com/agphd.
Over the last year and a half, we have been talking to farmers all over the United States who are extremely upset with tariffs and the trade deals that we have going between the United States and China. Well, most everybody that we've talked to has been focused on the output side, about our grain getting exported over to China and how these tariffs have hurt the prices. Okay, I agree with that 100%, but the problem here is we can't just look at this deal as one-sided. We've got to look at what are we bringing in from China that's now getting hit with tariffs here in our country, and how is that going to raise your input costs? So today we want to talk just a little bit about how these tariffs are affecting your crop protection product pricing going forward.
Well, certainly throughout the year we hear news and information about, well, one level of this negotiation is being dealt with or agreed on, but there are several other levels to come. So we're going to see this happen in phases. The problem is business goes on. So products are coming into the country, as Brian mentioned, like many of our crop inputs, such as crop protection products. We're shipping in crop protection products every week into our country. Well, as those products come in, whatever the tariffs are at the time they get brought in is what the price of the product is going to be. I don't think we're going to retroactively go back and change a lot of these things because, hey, that product comes into our country, it goes out, and in many cases it even hits the ground on American farms. So we're concerned about crop protection prices since many of these products are being manufactured in China.
All right, so whether it's the raw materials that are coming in or it's the finished goods coming into the United States, this absolutely is having an impact because a good majority of what is used in the United States for ag chemical products is from China. So, like Darren said, it all depends on when that stuff hit the ground. And here's the reason why we're bringing this up today. 2019 was a horrible year for a lot of retailers. They have product that's left over. There were a lot of retailers that actually had been buying product up since clear back at the end of 2017 into 2018, knowing that the tariffs were coming, or at least believing the tariffs were coming. So what we're trying to say here today is there is still some product out there that was bought pre-tariff. And it seems like about every month or two there are more tariffs that get put on more ag chemical products. So what we're saying to you today is I realize at this point a lot of the ag chemical products have only gone up 3%, 5%, maybe 10%, but we're expecting by the time all this old product gets out of the market here in the next couple 3 months, by next spring most ag chemical products are going to be up 10 to 15%.
You may be thinking, well, that's probably on some old generic products that I'm not even interested in, so I don't know if this is going to be a big deal for me. you would be thinking wrong, because it's going to impact some of the biggest products, and a couple of them that we should be talking about here are Roundup and Liberty.
Both Roundup and Liberty are slated, at least the active ingredients I should say, are slated for tariffs coming up here in December. So again, we're bringing this up today because our message all fall, in fact for the last year, has been beat tariffs, buy now, buy ahead of the tariffs. Now, if you believe that we're going to get a deal worked out with China, and who knows, maybe by the time you see this, if you're seeing it a week late, you might have already known, oh, hey, there's a deal worked out with China. Personally, we don't believe a full deal is going to be complete with China for a while. And the other thing, Darren brought this up earlier, it's when it hits the ground here in the United States. So if the tariffs were on, and all this product it's continually being brought in right now for the 2020 growing season, it's already got tariffs on it. Those aren't going backwards. So the earlier you buy, the better chance you have to get in on the 2017 and 2018 costs. Because if you're going to pay 2019 costs and going into 2020, we're just trying to tell you here, prices are going up. There's very little risk for you. Now, the big thing that we would say too, though, is there are some products that still have a lot of margin in them. So if the big company that is manufacturing them has 800% markup on it, does it really matter that their costs went up by $5? No, it doesn't, and they could probably absorb that. But what we're most concerned about is some of these lower price things like glyphosate, like glufosinate, that's Liberty, and a number of these generic products. They have nowhere to go but up because they were right down near costs. And now that costs are much higher, well, you're going to see costs higher reflected at your retailer.
So the key message here is to plan ahead. You know you're going to be using certain crop protection products on your farm. Check with your retailers now, see where the price levels are at, and if it's a good buy for your farm, buy it and take it home. That's the way that you can beat the tariffs. Well, one other thing you want to beat down your farm is our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this weed later in the show.
There are a lot of steps to having a perfect season. Don't let your fertilizer plan be the step that trips you up. No matter when you apply fertilizer, no matter how, AgroLiquid has the experts and the products that'll help you move closer to your target and hit the bullseye. AgroLiquid moves you closer to your target.
I need results. So I choose the one system I trust to take weeds down and keep them down on even my toughest acres with the kind of yield potential that helps keep me in the black to deliver my kind of results season after season. I choose the Roundup Ready Xtend crop system. I choose results.
It's been remarkable what we've seen out of the varieties of Xtend soybeans. The yield has come through for us.
We had the best soybean crop we've ever had. The yields were there.
With the Roundup Ready Xtend crop system, the yield boost and the lack of weed pressure really helps our bottom line.
The technology has exceeded my expectations. It's one thing that the industry has been looking for years.
There's nothing like harvesting record crops.
It starts with genetics, what you're made of. It takes agronomy. It's local. It's knowing your land and having the tools to put the right product in the right place. It's built on service with trust, grit, and determination. Because it turns out, what it takes to make the best product is a lot like what it takes to make a farmer. Golden Harvest, rooted in genetics, agronomy, and service.
Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whenever you want. In your life and on your farm, Case IH AFS Connect gives you more control. Monitor your operation, manage your fleet and your farm data your way. Case IH, rethink productivity.
Iron deficiency chlorosis can be a bad problem in soybeans and other crops. Today we want to talk about, I'm going to call it the Band-Aid approaches. But then also, what's the long-term true fix for IDC once and for all on your farm? We'll get to both of those today.
When we talk about iron deficiency chlorosis, that leads you to believe I'm deficient or short in iron, and now I'm going to see chlorosis or yellowing on my leaves. Well, half of that is right. You are going to see yellowing on leaves in most cases. The problem is not because you don't have any iron. We did a study, it's probably been 10 years at least now ago, where we took tissue tests on 600 different farms, and we found that iron was not what was short. We had plenty of iron. The problem was the iron was in the wrong form. Once your soil pH gets over 7, that iron moves from the ferrous form to the ferric form, and the plant needs the ferrous form, which is a positive 2 charge. Unfortunately, now the iron is in a positive 3 charge and not available.
Iron deficiency chlorosis can show up fairly early in the season, but it's something that can persist all throughout the season. So the whole key here is getting something done early on in the year or even before that.
Well, here's where I want to start, Brian, because the number one question that I get when it comes to iron deficiency chlorosis is, what seed variety should I plant? I just need to switch seed varieties and my problems will go away. Guess what? There's no seed variety that's absolutely perfect when you're going to plant soybeans in those iron deficiency chlorosis spots. There's certainly going to be some that don't yellow up as much or yellow up for as long or recover quicker. That's great. But there aren't any that are completely resistant. So this summer, I had farmers tell me, well, you know what? Those Extend beans are the worst thing ever. I'm switching to Enlist because the Extend beans had iron deficiency chlorosis. And then I had other farmers say, well, the Enlist beans are terrible. They get iron deficiency chlorosis. I guess I'm going to have to use Liberty or Roundup or Extend or whatever. No, it doesn't matter which trait platform you have. They all stink on iron deficiency chlorosis. Now, some are definitely better, and this is one of those, as Brian termed it earlier, Band-Aids that I would use, is pick one that's a little bit better, but follow some of these other management practices to really help you.
The other big Band-Aid approach is applying some iron. What you're looking for here is an iron chelate, and apply that right at planting time. Use a good strong rate.
What Brian's talking about here is an ortho-ortho EDDHA chelate, something like soy green, for example, that you could put on at a pretty good rate in furrow. Now, you could use these types of products foliar, but we see the most gain in terms of yield response and in terms of keeping that field green by putting it out in furrow.
If you want to spray some iron foliar, you can absolutely green up your plants once they start to turn yellow, but the problem is we usually don't see big yield gains with that. In other words, if you just want the plant to look nice, fine, go spray that iron. If you're actually looking to make some money, that's a waste of money.
The other Band-Aid, Brian, that growers will try to use is planting population. If you put more plants out there, you are going to have a better response against iron deficiency chlorosis because you've got more roots. They're kicking out more organic acids, trying to solubilize nutrients, and in the process, they're acidifying the soil. Now, the other thing that could help too is compaction. Because have you ever noticed that wheel tracks right through an iron deficiency chlorosis area stay green? Because they've forced out a lot of the bad things, the carbonates, the bicarbonates, and especially high levels of nitrates that we often find in these areas. So you can see a couple of those things that could help. I'm not saying compact your fields, but maybe you do want to plant a few more plants.
All right, I'm tired of talking about Band-Aid approaches. I've been talking about that for 30 years with farmers. Let's talk about how we actually fix the problem, like once and for all, and you're done with iron deficiency chlorosis for the rest of the years you farm. Wouldn't that be nice? Well, you absolutely can do it. What it amounts to is you've got to get the soil pH below 7. Once you do that, iron deficiency chlorosis, gone. Your iron stays in the ferrous form. That's what you do. So how do you get the pH down? Number one, you have to have fantastic drainage. Where we typically see the most problem with iron deficiency chlorosis is in cation exchange capacity levels of over 20. If your CEC is over 20, that tells us you have a real heavy soil. A lot of times you have quite a bit of magnesium, you have poor internal drainage, you need more tile lines, maybe even clear down to 20, 25, 30-foot spacings. My point is this, if you get that drainage good, now you can flush out of soil some of the things that are raising pH, like excess magnesium, like excess sodium. Usually what we'll do after we get that drainage right is we'll tell you use some elemental sulfur. What you're looking for here is very, very fine particles of elemental sulfur. And you get this applied, let's say in the fall. It's going to take a little bit of time to break down, but when that sulfur converts over to sulfate, you will have sulfuric acid formed. The acid will lower the pH. Well, when you get that pH down below 7, again, iron deficiency chlorosis goes away.
So what you're looking for with iron deficiency chlorosis out in fields, if you're not familiar with it, is you see yellow leaves that still have green veins. If you've got iron deficiency chlorosis, your pH is too high, you can add more plant population, you can switch varieties, but you've got to get this fixed on your farm or it will cost you yield. Another thing that definitely costs yield is our weed of the week. Do you have this weed on your farm?
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Corteva Agriscience, Agriculture Division of Dow DuPont. Finish the fight against tough weeds with the Enlist Weed Control System.
Weeds are tough, but we're tougher. With unrivaled weed control, reduced drift, and near zero volatility. So, who's tough now?
Our weed of the week today is wild oats.
Well, if you are a cereal grower, so you're raising wheat on a continuous basis, you very well know how much wild oats will cost you in yield. When you're comparing to foxtails, wild oats is going to cost 4 times as much of a yield penalty if you don't get it under control. So it's really critical that you take care of this. If you're rotating with other crops, they give you some great opportunities to take care of wild oats. If you're still just going to raise wheat, well, then you're going to have to be awfully fussy to take care of this weed.
Well, this is just a spring annual weed, so going out and doing something in the fall, generally speaking, isn't a real big deal. What we're after is spring control. So personally, I would suggest getting a pre-emerge herbicide out there. In corn or in soybeans, it's pretty easy. Soybeans especially, you can go out there with trifluralin, Prowl. It's going to wipe out wild oats. In corn, the best product ever was Eradicane. We don't have that on the market anymore. We do have Eptam though. It's basically the same chemistry for alfalfa. But in corn, just use something like Balance Flex, maybe even Harness Surpass Outlook Duo. Will thin the population a little bit. But then we get to wheat, and that's the big one. I would absolutely, if it's me, start with Prepare.
Well, Prepare is an ALS product, Brian, so that's one of the things too. You've got to try and mix up your modes of action. You've really got Group 2s and Group 1s. That's it. So now you're stuck with a Group 1 for post-emerge.
Yeah, but that's pretty easy because Axial is going to be the best thing post-emerge. That's an ACCase. So I use an ALS pre, I use an ACCase post. Awesome for weed resistance and awesome for wild oats control.
Well, if you've got wild oats in your area, it is important that you know if there is a resistance issue. So if you do have wild oats resistant to one of those families, make sure that you're protecting that other family by using pre-emerge herbicides where you can and rotating modes of action in your other crops.
All right, well, let's talk just a little bit more about what else you can do. Roundup as a burn down. You could switch to Zidua as a pre. That's one of the Group 15s, kind of like Outlook or Warrant. I mean, there are a lot of Group 15s that are out there. Post-emerge in corn and soybeans also, make sure you have excellent control there, so going into your wheat crop, you don't see near the wild oats pressure. Again, Roundup will work just fine, but all the grass killers in both corn and in soybeans will take out wild oats just fine.
This is a very important weed. I know it doesn't seem like much because you say, oats, come on, how bad can it be? But wild oats can be a big yield robber. Get them under control on your farm. That's all for this week's weed. Iron Talk is coming up next.
Tough, precise, efficient. Strip tillage with the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm. Learn more at soilwarrior.com/AgPhD.
There are a lot of steps to having a perfect season. Don't let your fertilizer plan be the step that trips you up. No matter when you apply fertilizer, no matter how, AgroLiquid has the experts and the products that'll help you move closer to your target and hit the bullseye. AgroLiquid moves you closer to your target.
If you're looking to expand your farm's grain handling, you want everything to be fast and efficient. The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. That's fast enough to fill a semi in 6 minutes. Plus, our hood is designed to gently direct the flow of grain straight down, keeping your crop in condition. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
Do you want perfectly conditioned grain, but are worried about the cost to upgrade your bins? With the Grain Temp Guard from Farm Shop MFG, the ideal solution costs less than you think. Preventing your stored grain from spoilage and overdrying can save your farm thousands of dollars in grain loss each year. And you can outfit your existing bin system for as little as a few $100s, not thousands like you might expect. Learn more about how to get the low-cost Grain Temp Guard system on your bins at farmshopmfg.com.
Do you feel like there's never enough time to get everything done before planting? The window for spring work is quick and unforgiving. Give yourself the upper hand with the ProTill High Performance High Speed Disc. More and more farmers agree the ProTill is the right tool for Springfield conditions and heavy residue management. Zero maintenance bearings, independent disc technology, oversized pins and bushings allow the ProTill to handle whatever field or conditions you can throw at it. Degelman High Performance Equipment.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whenever you want. In your life and on your farm, Case IH AFS Connect gives you more control. Monitor your operation, manage your fleet and your farm data your way. Case IH. Rethink productivity.
There's no magic to farming, but there is precision. So how precise do you need to be? I'll give you one example in today's Iron Talk. Last year we had a very cool spring with snow and cold rains right during corn planting time in the upper Midwest. As a result, crops got off to a slow start and in many cases were late planted. The fear of doing reduced till or no-till is that in cool years the ground won't warm up as fast in the spring. In strip till, where the strip is blackened, where the planter is designed to come back and place the seed, well, what happens if you miss that strip with your equipment and the seed is actually placed in the residue in between the tilled strips? The answer is simple. Your emergence will be delayed, and it will take longer for the young corn plants to reach the fertilizer strip placed by your strip till machine too. How much will it impact your yield? Studies have shown yield loss with seed placement even 2 inches outside the strip, and we've seen seeds struggle with emergence in the heavy residue between the rows too. If you really get off track, research has shown some big yield losses when you're 8 inches outside the strip with a 10 to 15% yield penalty, and sometimes even more. Certainly the corn will take longer to reach maturity if it struggles with emergence, and this will at minimum result in wetter corn, which even if it yields the same, takes away profit from your field. So does precision farming pay? The answer is yes, but only if you're precise with your execution, so be careful as you're building those strips this fall. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
That's all the time we've got for today's show, but if you're looking for more agronomic information, we'd encourage you to check out the Ag PhD Insider magazine. For more on that, just go to agphdinsider.com.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.